Aaron Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you for carrying on from the prior Speaker. I just want to talk a little bit about the brotherhood of men and women between Australia and touch on one aspect that the prior Speaker mentioned. It's not that we don't like Russell Norman because he's an Australian. We just don't like his politics. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that link my own personal family back to Australia. Some of you may know that what's on this $10 Australian note. If you've got a $10 Australian note, you should pull it out and look one day. On the $10 Australian note, it's one of the most famous socialists you've ever met in Australia, Dame Mary Gilmore. Dame Mary Gilmore was a journalist, a literary writer for many years and a poet in Australia. She was one of the most famous journalists and writers in Australia, and she was a very well-known socialist for the Australian Workers' Union, as I'm sure some of those people across the other side know. But, Mr Speaker, one of the neat things about that is that it shows you some of the links between our country and their country that fit across other aspects than the ones we've talked about traditionally around sport, around around issues around in the Defence Forces. I want to talk particularly about some of the changes that have been signed today, those changes in the field of business. One of the things that have been done, we've announced today, the ability for New Zealand businesses to invest up to $1 billion into Australia. Now, you think, well, so what with that? There's been a lot of worries and concerns about Australian companies investing here in New Zealand, but the ability for New Zealand companies to invest up to $1 billion in Australia is a very good thing. And I want to give you a couple of examples. There's a very large New Zealand company right now through the process of doing a takeover of a very large Australian company in the building products area. That transaction is worth about $700 or $800 million. Such a transaction is one that actually ordinarily, in a simple sense, would require some sort of approvals. But with the signing of these protocols today, such transactions do not need such bureaucratic approvals and can go ahead in a more efficient manner. That's a classic example of the benefits of CER and the extension of these protocols between our two great nations. Mr Speaker, we heard from Jacinda Ardern earlier on talking about some of the issues around skills and talking about one of the worries and waste of skills in terms of teaching people how to use text messages and calling to set jobs. Well, I say to that member, which is you want everybody to sit on a production line doing nothing, learning nothing for the rest of their lives, because teaching young people skills is one way of getting them better and higher paying jobs and more productive jobs, and that's what our government's about. Mr Speaker, we heard from Clayton Cosgrove bleating about earthquakes and worries about the earthquakes. Well, one of the great things about the links between New Zealand and Australia, which was mentioned today by Prime Minister Gillard, is the fact that down in Canterbury where I live, there are many Australians helping rebuild many houses, helping to inspect houses, and have come to provide us the skills that we did not have, sufficient skills and expertise in Canterbury at the time post the earthquake. Australia did. And though many Australians have been busy working and helping in the replanning and rebuilding for Canterbury, and that's a wonderful step forward. Pike River on the west coast, we had Australians provide many resources and skills as a wonderful example of the joint nature of Australia and New Zealand, and the fact that Australians came over, provided their resources that we did not have access to, shows a wonderful nature of the mix between Australia and New Zealand. And of course, Mr Speaker, there are also those wonderful things that we talk about sport. And one particular aspect about that is around some of the aspects around the wider aspects of sport. Sport's actually a very global business these days, and the ability to buy and trade and sell professional sports teams is an increasing nature of the business world and the business transactions. On Russell Crowe, our Kiwi we've lent to Australia, which we probably are proud of, is a major owner in the South Sydney Rabbitohs. There are other ability to buy into other major sporting franchises that are likely to appear. Over more and more time, Mr Speaker, these are the examples that you see more and more of New Zealand and Australian businesses becoming increasingly intertwined, the ability to create more jobs and expertise for the trade, which is, I think, there's something of $21 billion that exists currently, to be able to grow at over 8% per annum the last decade and continue to grow post the signing of CER. Mr Speaker, we've heard from the opposition the fear and loathing about the Australians coming and invest in New Zealand. Well, I say to them, what's wrong with Australians bringing expertise and skills into New Zealand? What's wrong with that? They bring ability to bring new skills, wealth into our country, and it helps employ New Zealanders. That's a good thing, because productive jobs and investment is a positive thing. You wouldn't hear that from Mr Ardern, you heard earlier on. She didn't think training made a lot of sense. Training people in new skills seemed to be a complete waste of time. But finally, Mr Speaker, I want to say that to the Australians out there, we like you, but we don't love you, and increasingly the ones I meet when I'm travelling around the world, I deal a lot with them in a way, but you have been everywhere, man. But Mr Jones is a classic example of one of the Australians gone well.
Kia ora.